I'm so happy that you decided to join me again today. I encourage you again to please write me at Kori@KoriGaila.com with any questions, requests, topics you may want to discuss. Today, I am excited to bring on a really amazing guest, Dr. Stephen Ezra West. He's a lymphologist, so he is an expert in the lymphatic system. Today, I wanted to really discuss with you the immune system, right? We're going through this pandemic and we keep hearing immune system booster, boost your immune system, strengthen your immune system. But what is this immune system, right? How does it work? What do we know about it? What can we do to help boost our immunity, right? Immunity meaning our defense against any kind of invaders. Right now we're battling with this invisible enemy. I think I've heard, even the president calling it an invisible enemy. But, what exactly? So we're dealing with microbes, we're dealing with invaders to the body, right? So I really wanted to talk about this and preventative care and what can we do to strengthen our immune system. We hear about COVID and the individuals that are at highest risk are those that are immune system compromised, meaning that their immune system is low. So how do we boost our immune system? What do we mean when we say boost our immune system, right? So we're going to get a little bit into that today, and then I'm going to have Dr. Stephen Ezra West take over because that's his area of expertise. I'm going to give you a little bit of information from my perspective, being the from a holistic herbalist perspective, although Dr. Stephen does incorporate natural practices into his approach to well-being and health. So one of my friends did mention to me, and I mentioned it to you guys before, to maybe share little stories of mine with you because I do have a lot of interesting stories. So I want to go ahead and share a story with you today about, say, 4 years ago. I was just really sick. An individual came into work sick. She'd been traveling. That was during the time of the SARS outbreak, so 3 or 4 years ago, maybe longer. I can't remember, but it was at that time, right? And she came into work after traveling, and so I got really sick. One thing I can say about what's happening now with the pandemic, there's a lot of pressure on people to go to work, They might not have sick pay. They might be threatened with job loss if they take too many sick days, things of that nature. So hopefully we will see, one of the maybe positive things that will happen is that, if we do get sick, our employers will encourage us to stay home, right? So that we don't bring whatever it is that we're battling with to work and get people sick. Like I got very sick. I was sick for about 3 weeks. I did end up going into the doctor. I had to go into the doctor because in order to keep my job, I needed a doctor's note at that point. So I did go in and I was diagnosed with the flu, strep throat, and pneumonia. So good times, right? I did get sick enough to the point to get, pneumonia, walking pneumonia, strep throat, and the flu. I was really ill. My fever wasn't extremely high. I think I was around 101 at that point. I was told by my doctor that if I didn't take my antibiotics, I would die. Strep throat can kill you. And that is true. Strep is one of those bacteria that, if left untreated, can turn into like scarlet fever. You can, strep. A lot of babies are born with strep B. There's different strains of this bacteria, right, that live within us, but when the balance gets out and they start to colonize, they can cause infections. Common infections would be like impetigo, skin infections, strep throat. So being me and having my background in natural medicine and herbs and Preventative care, I take things to the very edge. I don't like to take antibiotics. I'm very sensitive to antibiotics. I also understand that our body is made up of thousands and thousands of microorganisms, and when we use antibiotic therapy, we wipe out a lot of that landscape, a lot of those good bacteria, a lot of that, those colonies that are already established, that could be colonies that were established from the time we were born, right? So I took that to the very edge. I would not necessarily recommend any of you try this at home, but I did fill my prescription for antibiotics. I brought it home. I was watching my fever. 101 is not, but I had been sick for quite some time. And I was using a lot of herbal therapies, and they do take longer, right? But I was watching my fever. I was giving myself about 24 hours for my fever to break and start going down. If it would have spiked, I probably would have used the antibiotics. But I started getting these weird cravings, right, for buttermilk, right? Well, not 24. Prior to that, I had started to take this, buttermilk. I started buying cases and cases of buttermilk during this illness, and then just started drinking more and more buttermilk. And it was just very strange. I hadn't had buttermilk since I was like 5 years old. But again, I go a little bit on intuitive information that I get because I have been an herbal practitioner for a really long time. And so I like to tune into what my body's saying, and it was a strange craving, but I thought, well, I'm going to go with it. And I started buying all of this buttermilk. And then I just was so curious, and I thought to myself, what is in this buttermilk that is just like, I couldn't get enough of it. And when I read it, the culture that is used is Streptococcus lactis. So that was very interesting. I was dealing with a strep infection. There was this Streptococcus lactis, which is a different strain of this bacteria. But I did go ahead and look it up, and according to Farlex Partner Medical Dictionary, Streptococcus lactis, a bacterial species found commonly as a contaminant in dairy products, a common cause of souring and coagulation of milk. So thickening, buttermilk is thick, right? Yogurt, coagulation, but I don't know. Yogurt might not have the same strain of bacteria, right? But this souring, sour buttermilk. Some strains produce niacin, a powerful antibiotic that inhibits growth of many other gram-positive organisms. So that strep A is a gram-positive organism. I thought that was fascinating. Now, I'm not saying necessarily that the buttermilk, but cured my situation, but I was definitely establishing little colonies of Lactobacillus streptococcus lactis. So I don't know. It's interesting. It was interesting to me, but I do incorporate a lot of fermented foods into my diet because they're rich in these really good beneficial bacteria that we always are hearing so much about. So examples would be buttermilk, yogurt, raw kimchi, raw sauerkraut, kombucha. I like to use the raw fermented vegetables when possible, organic, raw, when possible, but those are really, really rich in those great bacteria, and that bacteria is what gives that souring taste, right? So you have your cabbage, your cabbage and your salt, and you put it together, that makes your sauerkraut. That souring is that bacteria is creating that, fermenting that sour taste. Very interesting. So looking at these beneficial bacteria, according to ScienceDaily.com, an article published in 2010, one of the most important functions of beneficial bacteria is boosting the immune system. Researchers have found that mice raised in sterile, germ-free environments have poorly developed immune systems. Sterile environments have been linked to poorly developed immune systems. So we are following our guidelines, using our sanitation, using our bleach sprays, sanitizing our hands, wiping our surfaces, but it's something interesting to think about. Senior author for Science Daily, Catherine Knight, PhD, and colleagues report on a featured article in the Journal of Immunology in the June 15th issue that the human body is teeming with bacteria. In each person, there are about 10 times as many bacterial cells as human cells. So you are 10 times more bacteria than you are human. Interesting. The digestive tract, it alone is home to between 500 to 1,000 bacterial species. So that beneficial bacteria we're talking about is in the gut, right? In the immune system, in the digestive tract, right? So a lot of practitioners say that a big part of our immune system is found in the gut. So keeping those beneficial bacteria alive and well in our immune system is a really wonderful practice for really boosting immunity, according to Science Daily. And this article that was published that Catherine Knight, PhD, are quoting in their research. Knight was a professor and chair of the Department of Microbiology and Immunology at Loyola University Chicago Stritch School of Medicine at the time that this was published. They studied the rod-shaped bacteria found in the digestive tract, and they found that when the exposed immune system cells called the B lymphocytes, when they expose these lymphocytes to the bacterial spores, the B cells began dividing and reproducing. So these B cells are our defender cells. Our guest, Dr. Ezra, is going to get a little bit more into that today. But these defender cells that are fighting began to multiply when they came in contact with these rod-shaped bacteria. There is a molecular binding Dr. Knight studied in the lab. They found that there was a molecular binding that takes place between the surface of the bacterial spores and the B cells that activates these B cells to divide and multiply. So that is fascinating. And yeah, of course, the more of these immune system cells we have, the stronger our immunity is going to be. I mean, logically speaking, that seems that there would be a correlation between that, just in reading this. Now, I want to say, of course, it is important that we're following our CDC guidelines. We're sanitizing our surfaces. We're using our hand sanitizer. That's what's been recommended during this time of epidemic. But it's interesting to note that, we are made up of more bacteria than we are human cells. So some examples of beneficial bacteria would be lactobacillus, bifidobacteria, streptococcus thermophilus, and then, I mentioned the streptococcus lactis, which was considered a contaminant, but sours the milk and produces an antibiotic kind of in the body. So it was interesting. Okay, before I bring on my guests, let's see, I want to talk just a little bit about some things that you can do at home to boost your immune system traditionally. So some of the herbs that are used traditionally are echinacea, elderberry, ginger, garlic, and cayenne. So you think about that garlic and cayenne like heating the body up, right? One of the things I like to do, I mix some lemon, cayenne, and ginger if I really need an immune system boost, if I'm feeling a little mucusy, right? That is a very warming, heating combination. And so if I look at Eastern medicine, if I pull from, say, Ayurveda, lemon, ginger, garlic, they're all warming, heating herbs, right? So we think about Agni is fire, digestive fire. lighting this digestive fire to move this, right? So that we can have the powerful digestion, so that we can absorb the nutrients. That fire moves through the body, right? It's a different way of thinking about things. We're used to our Western thought, right? But these sort of herbs stimulate some of those digestive juices too, right? So when we say digestive juices, right, we can also think about enzyme production. One of those is protease, right? Protease is one of those enzymes that actually keeps mucus viscous. So mucus is actually a cold, damp condition. If we have thick phlegm, that's a cold, damp condition in Eastern thought. So we want to add fire to that, right? So that fire in the digestive tract brings more enzymes. Protease keeps mucus viscous. Now, it's interesting because if we look at antiviral drugs, one of the things that they do is block protease, which is that enzyme that we produce in our own body through our pancreas, right? It's pancreatin, but in our digestive system, one of those is protease as well. So it does keep the mucus viscous, meaning looser, more movement. So when we cough, we can have, a lot of times we take expectorants to have a productive cough, to get that mucus out of the lungs. These enzymes keep that mucus not thick, right? Now, antiviral medications, so viruses actually use protease to reproduce. That's an interesting thing. But we have our own protease. So it's an interesting thing to understand, right? How our body works, how our systems work, how things reproduce, how vast our landscape of microorganisms within and without us, Very interesting stuff. Research on your own, read up. It's just interesting and fascinating, and yeah. So before I stop for the commercial break and bring on our guest, I want to just tell you one of the things that we do in the spa that you can do at home to kind of keep your lymph system moving. We get lymphedema. You hear about that edema. That's water, right? Puffiness. You're traveling. Your feet get swollen. Your legs get swollen. That edema in there, right? Lymphedema is a swelling in the legs. We want to keep the lymph system flowing and moving. And one of the things I love to do in the spa, but you can do at home before you get into the shower, is use a dry brush. So dry brushes, you can think of those body brushes, right? A lot of times they're made of boar hair. I know in the spa that I work in, they make them out of cactus. That's kind of cool, right? But the lymph system, if you're doing lymph drainage massage, it's a very light touch massage. The lymph system is very surface movement, right? So a practice you can do every day before you get into the shower, 5 to 10 minutes, like you brush your teeth, brush your body. Lightly, strokes up, always towards the heart. So you'll go up the legs towards the heart, up the arms towards the heart, up the back towards the heart, up the legs, right? Up here, down across the chest to encourage that lymph flow. That's something you can do every day before you get in the shower to give yourself just a little boost, keep that system flowing and moving and cleansing. And yeah, it's a good practice to get into. Okay, so thank you so much. I'm going to go ahead and stop for a commercial break now, and I will be right back with my guest.
Many people are searching for answers to health challenges. There are natural solutions for a healthy and empowered lifestyle that can be delivered right to your door. Email Carol at carolbirchwell.com and type Health with Kori in the subject line to receive a free ebook on essential oils. Visit carolbirchwell.com and connect with Carol via email for your free ebook. She will help you find the natural solutions that work specifically for you.
Visit KoriGaila.com and schedule your wellness consultation to receive a custom-designed, scientifically sound behavior action plan that is holistically based. Browse the website and enjoy free articles and valuable health and beauty information. Receive your free holistic skincare ebook. KoriGaila.com.
Okay, aloha. We're back with my guest, Dr. Stephen Ezra West, founder of Clarity University. And I'm just so happy to bring him on. We've been discussing the immune system today, and he is quite an expert in that field. Welcome. I'm so happy to have you, Dr. Ezra.
Well, I'm really honored to be on your show. Thank you very much. Yeah.
All right. So we've been discussing just a little bit about the immune system, and it's something we're hearing so much about right now with COVID and this pandemic we're going through, and we always hear, boost your immune system and do this and do that, and so there's a lot of information out there. Just really briefly, can you tell me kind of exactly what is the immune system? What do you see the immune system as being?
Oh, yes. Basically, it is the lymphatic system. And it contains, there's many elements of it. A lot of it is in the gut. You have more lymph nodes in that part of the body than anywhere you have. But I'll be explaining a lot of those elements on this show. I'm really looking forward to it. It's basically, your lymphatic system is your immune system. Their lymphocytes are the best fighters.
So those are the white blood cells, the leukocytes. I was talking a little bit about the leukocytes, and I know that they are the blood cells that gobble up invaders, but it's more than just white blood cells, right?
You got different types of immune cells, and it starts with the white blood cells, and then there are other types of lymphocytes, leukocytes, B cells if they're produced in the bone marrow, T cells if they're produced in the thymus gland. They do a lot of different things, and like the T cells, they're made up of some of the white blood cells can just divide up into like several white blood cells to just dissolve, neutralize, and eliminate. There's a lot of different words we've been using over the years, basically to eliminate any bad guys in the body.
Bad guys in the body, right? So we're hearing a lot about these invisible invaders. So these are these bad guys you're talking about, right?
Yeah, whether you want to talk about viruses, bacteria that are harmful, funguses that are harmful, any kind of poisons, this is your purification system is what we're talking about today.
Okay, the lymphatic system. Can you explain to me, because I do know, there's a lot, like I'm an esthetician, I work with the skin. The skin is a large organ of elimination, right? I always hear the liver is the filtration system. We have our kidneys. We have all of these other organs that are part of that excretory system. But the lymph actually moves within all of these systems, correct? I mean, it's assisting these organs?
Yes, it is the system that really helps us to fully more integrate medicine and all the life systems all together. And life is really made of systems. Depending on who you talk to, there's 10, 11, 12 to 14 different systems. I think on Wikipedia, they list 11 is what they're recognizing. The lymphatic system is one of those that are listed there.
Right.
And there's very little information about it anywhere.
Okay, well, so your bio actually says that you are also a lymphologist, a doctor of lymphology. What
is lymphology? I've been answering that question since grade school when the first day of class comes and all the kids are asked, what does your dad do for a living? My father was a lymphologist, pioneered it actually a lot of, especially the type of lymphology we're talking about, was the real mastermind who helped pioneer a lot of it. He was nominated for Nobel Prizes for some of his work, but basically, what is it? Well, it is the study of the lymphatic system. And what that is not something that people have really been taught. You can't take one course on it in any college, university, or medical school in the United States. Typically, there's less than 1 page out of 200 pages in the medical text to explain it. And the chapter, whatever there is written, even depending on which school you go to, whether it's Harvard or Yale or whatever, you can have you can expect to have about 30 minutes to 2 hours, depending on who the instructor is, and still they end up skipping over most of the chapter of what is written. I think the professors have been scared. Doctors have been really operating under a lot of fear. We've been seeing a lot of that now when they step out of a line from what drug companies or whatever who is in charge, insurance companies, whoever's in bed together, that's been controlling them. A lot of that basically it's mainstream now. Everyone's been seeing a lot of that abuse being unveiled, what they've been dealing with. It hasn't been their fault. Too many good scientists, because they get family members that get sick too. But if you really want to keep something quiet, you have to keep them quiet as you have to keep it away from them, really. And so it's not something that they're really taught in school. The less than 1 page out of 200 pages for something that is so important, it just isn't good enough. It's not enough education with all the trillions of dollars that have been dumped into education.
Oh, and I wanted to ask you actually, and I wanted to ask you, so what do you tell people when they ask if you are an MD?
You know, I get that a lot.
Into the subject.
I tell them, I'm not an MD, I'm a PMD.
And what is a PMD?
That's exactly what they ask. You know, Einstein said, this is what I say, Einstein said, intellectuals solve problems and geniuses prevent them, and the PMD is a doctor of preventive medicine. Okay. So, you know, there's a lot of cool things that Einstein said that I like to quote from.
Well, he's a good source to go to if you're gonna, you know, quote anybody. I think that's a pretty good place to start, for sure. Yeah.
So the power of prevention, if it were worth, if an ounce of prevention is worth a pound of cure back during the time that quote was invented, I wonder what people would say it's worth today.
I love that quote. I love that quote. And as you were talking about lymphology and the lack of education in that particular area of study in med school, I just in the back of my mind couldn't help also, because I have a background in nutrition, thinking about how underrepresented nutrition is as well in medical school, right? They're starting more and more to bring that to the forefront as how very vital good nutrition is, right? But it sounds like there's these little areas in the education system when we're talking about how medical doctors are being educated, and we're missing this whole area of study. It sounds like lymphology is one of those as well, right?
You know, yes.
You were mentioning, I apologize, go ahead.
Oh, no, I don't mean to cut you off. I just want to make sure I also let the listeners know that I have several doctorates and are really becoming more and more integrated. There's a lot of different directions I can go. You know, cellular oncology, cellular physiology is really the basis of all physiology. Mm-hmm. And we're going to talk about the terrain today, terrain theory. We're going to describe at least the core of that. It's really important research. And, you know, my doctorates have to be non-licensed in order to teach what I teach. I mentioned that a lot of doctors, professors, they're afraid to get into this particular area of research, especially. There's been a strong history, over a lot of history, of doctors being made examples of who were talking about things that they just, you know, people in power just didn't want taught. It wasn't beneficial for the drug companies to teach people like the science behind all the healing arts, for example, and for people how to heal themselves with very simple, easy things that don't cost anything.
I actually seen a couple of MDs who are integrative doctors who won't even take insurance for various reasons, or, you know, myself, I never went ahead and followed up with my board exams for my area of study for that very reason, because if you go outside of what that prescribed methodology of treatment is, now you're kind of at risk of judgment by these big boards, you know, the AMA, the Board of Psychology, you know, things like that. And so this is not the first time I've heard that, and I really appreciate you bringing that out for our listeners, because a lot of people really aren't privy to that information.
Right. And thank you for acknowledging that. You know, talking to nurses, as I have for decades, when they get with somebody like me who knows so much, and knowing that I'm not going to put them in harm's way because I know it's not their fault either. They do a lot of the work, while doctors get a lot of the credit of what they're doing. In fact, they've always been willing to tell me the truth about the situation with the medical system that we,
Right.
and it's been getting, you know, I teach, if we don't learn the lessons from certain challenges in our life, then they always get bigger until we do learn the lesson from them.
Absolutely.
And I think what's happening now is a perfect example of people who are really in control of the medical profession and their influence globally in a way that we've never seen it before. We are in the middle of a war like no other war we've ever been fighting. And the rise in the disease rates, death rates from disease, it's been the biggest war that we've ever fought, along with the healthcare costs that have gone along with it, has been the biggest crippler of our economy. In fact, the number one cause of bankruptcy has been surprise healthcare costs for decades, and 75% of those bankruptcies have full coverage medical insurance, and that didn't cut it.
How is that possible? I don't,
you know,
how is that even
well, because the healthcare costs have been doubling and tripling every 10 years since 1950. So when Obama, the first day he was president, in his inauguration speech, he said the first thing he talked about was the economy and the economical crisis. He said the first thing we have to do to solve the economical crisis is to solve the rise in healthcare costs.
Mm-hmm.
And his solution was just to have the government pay for it, but it's never really been a money problem. It's been an educational and health problem.
Okay, educational and health problem. Okay, so you're talking about these, with the trillions of dollars that you just mentioned that have been kind of dumped into medical science and schooling. Why don't we have more published and taught? Why is that? I mean, is it just not really that important, or?
The system, the system that really connects to our lifestyle and all the positive or negative choices that we make and its impact on our health. The lymphatic system is really what connects to that better than any other system. It actually is like, think of a big GPS system or a satellite system, first of all, around the world. Think of the world being our body. And then think of these satellites that are so powerful that they can actually see inside of every building as every cell in our body. They can see if there's any bad guys in those buildings. They can see, smell, hear everything that's going on. Think of that as your lymphatic system. Your lymphocytes, they do, with all the checkpoints they have, the bloodstream doesn't have any filters in it. It's the lymphatic vessels that have those. They're called lymph nodes that house the white blood cells and lymphocytes. And they rigorously train, they're testing everything that's coming through. If they find any bad guys, as long as they're in a healthy environment with their life processes on, they just wipe them out.
I mean, how do they do that? Like, how does that work?
How that works, I have some basics that I like to cover before I get into, and I'd like to be able to cover the details of how that works. But basically, there's a healthy environment of the cells that is the master of the key mechanism, like the master of all master mechanisms of health versus disease. And I have this chart that I like to show of that healthy and the disease environment. And basically, the healthy environment on the left of that chart shows no inflammation. It shows the cells close together, tight, and that's a sub-pressure environment, where the disease side on the right, it shows the cells further and further apart with excess fluid, and that is trapped albumin in water. Albumin is the most abundant blood protein, and 70% of all the blood protein is albumin. There's 3 different types, and it's also the smallest one that we have. And these are the water magnets. It's also a carrier for the drugs, which might be a motive of why this information is not taught. It's a main transporter, not just for the drugs. According to the Merck manual, it carries the drugs throughout the body, but also it's a carrier for a lot of the nutrition. And in fact, we lose the whole content every 24 hours. As you see on the top of that chart, it is a blood capillary, and it's full of holes. That type of blood vessel, there's 3 different types of blood vessels, arteries and veins. The capillaries are the smallest, right at the bed of the cells. They're full of what's called capillary pores. And Starling's hypothesis, which Dr. Starlings from the 1800s came up with, says that the albumin doesn't leave at all. And that's back before our modern scientists discovered anything about lymphatic vessels, but it's been proven to be a myth, him saying that they don't leak any albumin even the smallest, the most abundant blood protein. And he says if any does leave, that it doesn't change his theory because it's an insignificant amount. Well, the fact is we lose the whole content of albumin every 24 hours, and if not for its constant retrieval, an efficient retrieval by the lymphatic vessels, we would all bleed to death internally in a matter of hours. Without the subpressure vessels, which you see on the bottom, that's a lymphatic vessel. They're lined with one-way check valves, as you can see. The one-way check valves, when we have lifestyle choices that activate them, because it doesn't have a heart that beats like the bloodstream, it's more connected to our lifestyle than most people have any awareness of, because they're not taught. And those things mostly don't cost anything. Things like simple deep breathing. You see a guy on the left of the chart there. That's an artist's illustration of lymphatics in the body. Right between the lungs, you see the largest lymphatic vessel called the thoracic duct, and it gets also activated with deep breathing. So at the peak of a deep breath, the lungs put pressure on it because it's right in between the lungs. It makes it shoot like a geyser, like an oil well. It should be springing up into everlasting life with every deep breath that people take.
Right. So I think a lot about a lot of yogic practices. I practice pranayama and, different yogic practices where you do really focus on the breathing. And even in Hawaiian, ideology and thought, there was so much emphasis placed on this, breath of life, this idea of breath of life. And as you're describing it, it brings to my mind this idea that, yes, this breathing is really this life-giving, necessity, oxygen for one, but then as you're saying, with this pressure and creating a better cleansing process, I think that you're saying for this system, through being conscious of breath, that practices like this can be highly beneficial to supporting the immune system, or that idea of boosting the immune system. I mean, is that what you're saying?
Absolutely. If you know what something as simple as deep breathing does to actually recreate that healthy environment of your cells. Because your whole lymphatic system, you have more lymph vessels than blood vessels. This is something that most people don't know. And you have more lymph than blood, and it's activated. The first thing I talk about is by deep breathing. You have to clear that thoracic duct, and it shoots like a geyser. It is basically your body's internal fountain of youth. When you activate it, it should be springing up, and it pushes the albumin and water back into the bloodstream at the base of the neck. You've got the subclavian veins on both sides. That's where it dumps right back into the bloodstream. Right there is at the base of the neck. And when Christ, not everybody's Christian, but in history, not everybody would agree whether he was the Son of God or not. We could all probably, most of us agree that he's a great master. And he had his side pierced, and people translated it as water and blood leaving, that came out. He was pierced right at the base of the thoracic duct for that to happen. And it was actually blood and lymph coming out. Now, Native Americans, they knew about it even before the 1800s. They called it the Great White Bloodstream because they had intuitives that could see into the body beyond the physical. They had intuitives that are also, called visionaries or seers. And every culture's had these. I believe that even during, the time of what happened with Christ, that there was, in some ways, more knowledge about this thing. That if you look at some of the original writings, we might have some terms, if we knew the language better, like if it were something that we hear Native Americans saying, the Great White Bloodstream, and here today they think, oh, it was water, because that's all they knew. But really, it's lymph. Even the cerebral spinal fluid is lymph fluid.
Okay, and so the cerebral spinal fluid is what flows through the spine and up into the brain. So that's nourishing the brain. A lot of medications go through that that's that blood-brain barrier that is protected, right? But the lymph is able to move through that, or not necessarily. There's a barrier to the brain. So can you explain, does the cerebrospinal fluid always does go into the brain? Is that correct?
See, this is the same fluid. It's mainly albumin and water is what we have around our cells. It's the main blood protein. In the cerebrospinal fluid, you have an additional blood protein, the fibrinogen, which is the medium-sized one, and then there's the biggest one called the globulin. You don't have to remember the scientific terms. There's small, medium, large. The smallest one, 70% of the blood is albumin. And so that's mainly what's in most of the lymphatic vessels. That content naturally seeps out every 24 hours. And the lymphatics is a subpressure system, unlike the bloodstream, which is a positive pressure system. Without the subpressure lymph vessels, the blood vessels would collapse, which is called shock. It's also called hypoalbuminemia, and that's a name. Even newer studies have been done showing that hypoalbuminemia is a predictor of death by coronavirus.
Oh, really?
Yeah, so is the terminal inflammation. But they don't put two and two together. They suggest we do more studies. We've already dumped billions of dollars into putting synthetic albumin in the blood. Meanwhile, myself, I've been saying no, they've had it all backwards because they haven't been taught how the albumin leaves the blood. Cardiologists aren't even taught that without the subpressure lymphatic vessels, we don't even have a positive pressure in the blood. And if they do, they can't really talk about, especially what they can't teach their patients, especially what activates those vessels without ending up in a big trouble. Doctors have been really afraid of this area of science, and they really they haven't been able to teach their patients what activates the lymphatic vessels without getting their licenses taken away, without getting fired right on the spot if it really gets, if word gets out what they're talking about. They've been really afraid of this area of science, even talking about it.
That's hard to believe. That's actually true, huh? That's kind of crazy.
We've been seeing this for decades now. Look what we see today with the doctors who've been willing to stand up. All of a sudden, all it takes is one little report and they're under investigation by the medical board.
And why is that? I mean, I think pharmaceutical companies obviously have something to do with this, but does this have a lot to do with the Western medical paradigm as a whole, or just this licensing board being so stringent?
I have a proverb that I like to share.
Okay.
It goes back. There is a lot of history that I can share of how we got from where we are from where we were to where we are. We actually have less than half the medical schools today than we did before the first NGO, Rockefeller Foundation. That is a fact that I've been saying for many years. And to understand why and what happened after Rockefeller Foundation, where Rockefeller Foundation came from was Standard Oil Trust. But I don't want to get into all the history because it sounds a lot like a conspiracy theory, right?
Yeah,
not everybody wants.
I'm over here just thinking,
Yeah, there's a lot of talk about conspiracy theory stuff today.
Right.
We have a lot of evidence that actually that does very strongly sound. It rings very loudly like conspiracy. What I want to give you is some simple analogies because we want to empower people. And one of the basic analogies is my version of a Chinese proverb. If you can visualize a stagnant pond with a little stream flowing into that pond, where someone is shown the pond first, and then shown a stagnant, a stream that comes out, say a ditch bank, the bank broke and created this stream of water that was going into the stagnant pond, a little stream. And then the person's handed a bucket and asked to commence to drain the pond. If they first take steps to empty the pond bucket by bucket, they're designated as having insanity. Yet if they first take steps to dam the inflow, then they're designated as being sane. And the definition of insanity is keep doing the same thing you've done and expect different results. Well, everything out there without damming that riverbank or that ditch bank is doing what you've always done, expecting different results, no matter what science it's based on. What we're showing with the system that my father helped pioneer, which I've also made contributions to, myself, is really how to first dam the riverbank so that we can be sane. And it really connects to our lifestyle, the things that we were doing to cause the break in the riverbank to begin with. Because the disease environment that's in that chart that we showed in that disease environment is basically that stagnant pond. Every single itis is inflammation. The word tumor comes from the Latin origin. It means to swell. This is what people need to know. That is the disease environment. And there is a perfect living environment where it's impossible to have any itises, because by definition, you cannot have it. You can't have any tumors. And where the cells have oxygen and nutrients from the dissipation that happens basically with every beat of the heart, all the water content in the blood shoots out of the capillaries, and it's supposed to shoot all the way across the cells. That in the disease environment, there's a distance problem where it doesn't shoot out. When the energy comes out, actually blood proteins lock. That's discovery 6 to 7 of the 7 golden discoveries my father talks about. And it's what makes rigor mortis happen after someone dies. It also makes a tumor hard. And it also ends up locking.
I mean, you have so much information, and I really would love to have you come back on another time, because you are just a plethora of just, amazing, sounds like really very revolutionary information. And
what else would you like me to talk about?
Sorry. I know that you were talking to me a little bit about you have a multitude of online educational platforms, information that you can share with people. So maybe can you just tell me just a tiny bit about your university? I mean, for lack of a better word.
Yes.
Your online educational platform. Can you go ahead and share that with our audience in case they want to follow up with you and learn more?
There's lots of different levels that people can start. There's a lot of free information out there. And so people can start with that, the Zero Disease YouTube channel, which is also, when you go there, it says Clarity University on it. But directly...
So that's zero disease.
Yeah, one of the fastest and easiest ways to find me is from the main website, I would say Zero Disease, even though there's a whole bunch of domain names that I help manage. So zeroddisease.com, and there's a links page there that will give you access to all kinds of wealth of information, starting at the free level. I think you'll be really surprised how long it may take you just to get through. We've got a couple minutes left, by the way. I think you might.
Okay.
So, zeroddisease.com, you'll see a lot of different educational programs. The complete program is called the Power Heal System with the Applied Lymphology course, and they actually go together. There's a bunch of self-healing techniques that I put into a brand that I call Power Heal. And
I mean, I think I love that so much, because I've been talking about that on this show here, but other shows that I've had other guests on. And, living in our current pandemic COVID environment, a lot of individuals really do need to learn self-care and how to provide these things for themselves from home. So again, it sounds like you have a number of different techniques our viewers can use if they visit you at zeroddisease.com.
Yes, and we're talking about having the science for all the healing arts, so it's very supportive of all of them.
Wonderful.
When you understand why, with more clarity, why each of those healing arts does what it does, more than the people who are actually practicing them, you can actually do things that they never thought of doing, okay?
That's awesome.
We're not limited by modality.
Thank you so much for giving me all of this information, for giving this information to our viewers. I really appreciate it. And I hope that our audience will visit you at zeroddisease.com. And I hope that I can have you back again, because, we've talked offset a little bit about just so many different topics, and it's so wonderful to have someone to speak with who is so knowledgeable in such a number of different areas you're a PMD, a doctor of preventative medicine. So I hope to have you on again soon. Thank you so much for joining me today, Dr. Stephen Ezra West, whose nickname is Dr. Ez.
You're
I
welcome,
really
Kori.
appreciate
Thank you very much for having me on.
Thank you
Honor.
so much. Aloha.
Aloha.
Hi, I'm Maria Rene Davila, founder of the Successful Women in Business and Chief Executive Officer of the Global Trade Chamber. During this global pandemic, many small businesses are struggling to survive and find new clients. We have created a great opportunity for you. For the first time ever, we present the 100 Successful Women in Business live virtual convention. 5 reasons why you cannot miss this fabulous event. Learn from global experts at the conference. Meet the incredible women leaders being recognized from many nations. Visit the Business Virtual Expo. Network and introduce yourself to other business owners. Receive a complimentary copy of the Global Trade Chamber digital magazine. And don't forget the International Fashion Show. We have a very special gift for you to participate. 50% off of all packages participating in this fabulous event now. Visit our website www.100swb.com. I hope to see you there.
Thank you so much for joining me today. I hope that you enjoyed this week's show. Again, please contact me with questions or comments at Kori@KoriGaila.com. And again, visit my website, KoriGaila.com. I am a beauty and wellness consultant. I work with behavior science to help you achieve your health goals by looking at behavior patterns and trying to establish new and healthy behaviors. Again, that's KoriGaila.com. Until next week, stay happy, stay healthy. Aloha.